On my 25th birthday, my parents gave me a slice of cake and an eviction notice. Not in writing, not legal, just words spoken at the dinner table with such cold finality, I thought for a second I had misheard them. You need to move out, today. My father said it between bites of lasagna. My mother didn't look up from her plate. My younger sister Lily kept scrolling on her phone, unfazed. I just sat there frozen, one hand still holding the plastic fork, with a bite of cake that now tasted like cardboard in my mouth. No one had asked me what I wanted to do for my birthday. No one even said happy birthday with genuine warmth. The cake had no candles, no singing, no photos. Just a boxed supermarket cake with the name spelled wrong, Elisa. My name is Elena. They called it a family dinner, but it felt more like a business meeting where I was the liability being quietly terminated. I don't understand, I finally said, my voice thin. My father wiped his mouth with a napkin. You've had plenty of time to figure things out. It's time you start living like an adult. I am living like an adult, I said. I pay rent, I work, I help around here. Helping doesn't mean anything if you're still under our roof, he snapped. My mother finally spoke, her tone clipped and distant. Your sister needs space for her wedding. The guest room isn't big enough. We're converting your room into a prep space. Lily smirked. I saw it. That little curl at the edge of her lips. She always got everything. The nice clothes, the college fund, the car, the tutors, the trips. Everything. Meanwhile, I took on student loans. No one warned me about worked 2 jobs in college and moved back home only because I couldn't afford the rent after my contract job ended. You said I could stay until I got something stable. I'm working. I'm saving. I'm trying, I said, a tremble sneaking into my voice. Trying isn't doing, my father replied. It's not personal, Elena, my mother said, eyes still fixed on her plate. But it felt personal. It felt calculated. Like they had discussed this already and decided my birthday was the cleanest moment to make the cut. No mess, no guilt. Just a date they could remember easily. By 6 p.m., I was standing on the porch with 2 suitcases, a laundry bag, and a box of things that didn't matter to anyone but me. The sky opened up with rain. No one helped. No one said goodbye. I wasn't even offered an umbrella. I stood there, drenched mascara, bleeding down my cheeks, even though I hadn't realized I was crying. I wasn't homeless in the cardboard box under the bridgeway. But I had no plan, no safety net, no savings to rent anything decent immediately. My parents had made it clear I wouldn't get a cent more of help. I slept in my car that night, parked behind the 24-hour pharmacy where I used to work. And while the world didn't end, something inside me cracked. Not because I was hurt. I'd been hurt before. But because this was the first time I realized I was never part of their plans. I was a placeholder, an obligation. And now I was excess. I stared at my phone all night. No texts, no missed calls, not even from Lily. That was when the idea took root. Not revenge, I'm not that cruel, but fairness, balance, justice. If they wanted me to survive on my own, I would. And I'd show them what that looked like. I parked 3 blocks away from where they kicked me out. It wasn't strategy, it was shame. I didn't want the neighbors to see me curled up in the back seat of a 2005 Toyota Camry, the same car I used to drive my sister to school in. The engine still made that ticking sound when it cooled, like it was whispering disapproval. The streetlights above flickered, casting long shadows across the windshield. I pulled my jacket tighter and placed my folded graduation gown on the seat beside me like a fragile hope I couldn't bear to wrinkle. It still had the tag. I hadn't had time to take it off. I didn't cry. I stared at the ceiling of the car like it held answers. Like if I looked long enough, it would give me a map out of this mess. I kept replaying the moment Dad turning his back, Mom handing me that suitcase, like it was some unwanted gift. No explanation, no apology. I wasn't a rebellious kid. I never got in trouble, never gave them reasons to be ashamed. I just asked one question too many that night. Why does she get everything and I get nothing? Maybe they were waiting to unleash years of resentment. Maybe they just needed a reason. The car smelled like old coffee and cheap air freshener. I cracked a window to keep from suffocating on my own thoughts. My phone buzzed. One message from Mia, my best friend. "Hey, you okay? Want me to pick you up?" I stared at it. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but I couldn't type a single word. What would I say? Hey, my parents kicked me out on my birthday because I reminded them I exist too. No, that would make it real. So I turned my phone off. I pulled my knees to my chest and tried to sleep, but sleep didn't come. Only questions. Only bitterness. Only the ache of betrayal from people who were supposed to love me the most. I thought about my sister still asleep in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by gifts I helped wrap in a house I wasn't allowed in. She didn't text, she didn't call, she probably didn't even ask. That night something shifted in me. Not anger, not vengeance, but clarity. If they saw me as disposable, I'd make myself unforgettable. Not by yelling, not by begging. By becoming someone they couldn't ignore, someone they'd wish they hadn't abandoned. I started making a plan, not the full thing yet, but a direction. I knew their bank details, their online habits, their passwords. I used to help them with their taxes. I'd set up the autopay for their mortgage. All legal, all traceable. I wasn't going to destroy them. I was going to wake them up. I opened the Notes app on my phone and typed one sentence: "They don't get to sleep peacefully while I sleep in a car." Then I set my alarm for 5:30 a.m. I had class the next morning. Graduation week was still happening, and I wasn't going to let them steal that from me too. As I finally closed my eyes, I didn't feel warm, but I felt ready. Ready to reclaim my place in a world that tried to forget me. Ready to show them what happens when quiet people decide to speak. The university campus had never looked so foreign. I walked through the gates the next morning, my shoes still dusty from the sidewalk where I'd stepped out of the car. I hadn't brushed my hair, I hadn't eaten, but I had shown up. That alone felt like a revolution. People smiled at me like nothing had happened. Professors waved, classmates nodded, and I kept walking like I wasn't carrying a suitcase of silence on my back. I sat in the lecture hall, opened my notebook, and acted like the past 12 hours weren't echoing between every line I wrote. But inside, a storm was gathering. After class, I went to the library, the one place I could breathe. I used to help my mom navigate her online accounts from these same public computers. She'd forget passwords. I'd reset them. She never changed them. She trusted me. That was her mistake. I logged into her email using a combination. I remembered her maiden name and my sister's birth year. It still worked. I wasn't looking to spy. I was looking for understanding. That's when I found the message she'd sent my aunt in Florida 2 days before my birthday. "Emily's always been independent. She'll figure things out. We're focusing on Lily's future right now." They hadn't kicked me out in anger. They had planned it. They decided I was collateral. Replaceable. That was the last straw. And yet I still didn't cry. Instead, I downloaded every bank statement linked to their shared accounts. I wasn't planning to hack them. I knew better than that. But I did notice something they probably hadn't. Every bill, every subscription, every recurring payment ran through the same online banking login I had helped set up years ago. The same password I had memorized when I was 17. It wasn't just access. It was leverage. I stepped outside the library, sat on a bench beneath the jacaranda trees, and stared at the world with a new lens. I didn't want revenge. I wanted recognition. I wanted them to stop treating me like a shadow in my own life story. So I made a phone call. "Hi, I'd like to report a fraudulent address change on my parents' bank account," I told the representative. "I think someone tried to access their funds without permission." I gave my name, my old address, and the email that was still linked to the account recovery. They locked the account temporarily for investigation. That was step 1. Next, I reset the passwords to their Amazon, Netflix, and utilities portals. I didn't cancel anything. I didn't steal a cent. I just paused it all, froze it, put the brakes on the world they built without me. Then I logged out, sat back, and breathed. I wasn't breaking the law. I was using the access they had handed me over the years, the same way they used me to run their errands, fix their printers, set up their online bill pays. I was in some small way interrupting the comfort they had so confidently assumed would always be theirs. That night, I returned to my car with 2 bags of groceries Mia had quietly left in the back seat. I sent her a single text, "Thank you." I heated up soup at the university student lounge. I brushed my teeth in the bathroom. And then I opened my laptop and began drafting my application to a graduate program I had been too afraid to apply for before. They had pushed me out expecting me to disappear. Instead, I was starting to appear everywhere. I wasn't done. I was just beginning. It started with silence, not the kind that's peaceful, but the kind that feels like a pressure drop before a storm. By Wednesday, I got the first call, unknown number. I ignored it. Then a message, "Emily, it's Dad. Call me when you get this. Something weird is going on with the bank." I stared at the screen. Not a single word about where I was. Not a single apology. Just confusion. Just worry about their own inconvenience. I didn't call back. On Thursday, another message came in, this time from Mom. "Hey, sweetheart, did you change any passwords by mistake? I can't log into Netflix or our utility account. Love you. Love you." It was astonishing, really. The sudden affection when things started to crumble. She hadn't said those words on my birthday. She hadn't said them when I sat in tears on the porch holding my suitcase. But now she needed help. That evening, Mia and I sat in the laundromat while my clothes dried. I showed her the messages, and she gave me a look I'll never forget. "Are you going to fix it?" she asked gently. I shook my head. Not yet. Because it wasn't about the money. It never was. They still had their house. They still had Lily. They still had their pride. But now, for the first time, they were tasting helplessness, the same flavor they had fed me when they closed the door on my birthday. I wasn't cruel. I didn't erase anything. I didn't touch their savings. But I kept things paused. On Friday, I overheard Lily's voice on Mia's phone. They were friends once from high school. "I don't know what's going on," Lily said. "Dad's been on the phone all day. Mom cried this morning because the heating bill's overdue, and she couldn't log in. They think someone hacked them." Mia just hummed "Eyes on Me" the whole time. The next day, I got a knock on the window of my parked car. It was Lily. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her voice was cautious, but not angry. "Emily, are you okay?" I opened the door slowly. "You mean, am I safe, or am I causing trouble?" I asked, my voice steady. She sighed. "Look, I know what they did wasn't right, but things are really bad right now." I nodded. "They were bad for me too. On my birthday. Remember?" She looked away. "You could come back," she whispered. "They're different now. They're scared." That word lingered in the air. Scared. They weren't sorry. They were scared. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and took a deep breath. "No," I said softly. "I'm not coming back. Not yet." That night, I logged into the banking portal one last time, not to lock anything but to check the notifications. Dozens of login attempts. Multiple password resets. Frozen transactions. No fraud detected, just a system doing what it was built to do. I clicked sign out. Then I sent one email. "I'm safe. I'm on campus. Please don't call me again unless it's to say you're ready to talk about what happened. Not what's happening to you, but what you did to me." Emily, I turned off my phone, pulled my blanket over my shoulders in the back seat, and I slept. For the first time in weeks, I slept without fear, because for the first time, they were the ones left outside in the cold. My name is Emily Rivera, and I was born on a Wednesday morning in a small 2-bedroom house tucked behind a faded blue gas station in rural Oregon. My parents, Martin and Denise, weren't bad people, not in the criminal sense, but they were selectively generous. Most of that generosity went to my younger sister, Natalie. Natalie was born 2 years after me and entered the world like a firework on the 4th of July. Blonde curls, pale skin that never bruised, and a laugh that could get her out of anything. If I was the quiet storm, Natalie was the summer parade. Neighbors adored her. Teachers praised her. My parents worshipped her. My father ran a modest carpentry business out of our garage. He had rough hands, a short temper, and a quiet pride in things he built. My mother worked part-time at the post office, but her full-time job, as far as I could tell, was managing Natalie's social calendar. Gymnastics, dance recitals, spelling bees. They always had time, energy, and money for her. Me, I was the kid who didn't need much. Or so they told themselves. We all lived under one roof, but it never felt like a shared home. My room was the converted pantry next to the laundry area. It smelled of detergent and old wood. Natalie had the bedroom with the window and sunlight. I used to pretend I liked the sound of the washer spinning at night. It was easier than wishing for quiet. There was no shouting, no abuse, no cruel punishments. Just silence where warmth should have been. Indifference wrapped in politeness. My achievements were met with nods. Hers were celebrated with banners and cake. The house had a crooked porch and a kitchen where the faucet always dripped. My dad promised to fix it for years. He never did. But when Natalie complained that the paint in her room was too boring, he bought 3 cans of lavender and redid the walls that weekend. We weren't wealthy. We weren't even comfortable. But my parents stretched what they had always in Natalie's direction. Birthday parties at the roller rink. New clothes every school year. Private math tutors. I got hand-me-downs and a "you're smart enough to figure it out" when I asked for help with algebra. Still, I didn't hate them. Not then. I just thought maybe they saw something in Natalie I didn't. Maybe I was too quiet, too independent. Maybe I'd earn more of their love if I worked harder, needed less. That thought stuck with me for years. Natalie and I went to the same elementary school, just 2 grades apart, but it might as well have been 2 different planets. Teachers would smile at her in the hallway, asking about her dance recital or what book she was reading. When they looked at me, their eyes held the faint recognition of someone searching their memory. Like I was the older sister who should have done more, smiled brighter, stood straighter. At home, the comparisons weren't loud. No one yelled or made lists of who did better. But they were constant. My mother would say, "Look how Natalie keeps her side of the room tidy even though we didn't share a room." My father would watch her twirl in a new dress and say, "That one knows how to carry herself." And when I came home with a 95 on a science test, he nodded and went back to sanding a cabinet door. Natalie got gold stars. I got quiet nods. I once brought home a painting from art class, a messy blend of trees and skies. My mother smiled, barely glanced at it, then set it aside to help Natalie rehearse her poem for the school showcase. The painting stayed on the kitchen table for days, ignored until it got splattered with oil from a pan she left too close. I threw it away without saying anything. There was a year Natalie won the regional spelling bee. My parents invited the entire neighborhood for a backyard barbecue in her honor. I remember standing there holding the lemonade jug, watching neighbors pat her on the back and say how proud her parents must be. No one asked what I'd done that year. I had won the district-wide essay competition. The same week. But it wasn't televised. No trophy. Just a certificate folded into my backpack. I never showed them. Being compared wasn't the worst part. It was the way I slowly believed I deserved it. That I wasn't interesting enough to be celebrated. That being quiet meant being forgettable. I began to shrink into the background of my own life, because that's where I fit. It's funny how love doesn't have to be denied to be painful. Sometimes it just isn't offered with the same enthusiasm. And when you're a child, you don't have the words to name that hurt. You just carry it, like a coat 2 sizes too big, awkward, uncomfortable, but always there. One winter, Natalie got the flu and stayed home for a week. My mom made her soup from scratch, fluffed her pillows, rented her favorite movies. When I caught the same flu 2 weeks later, I was told not to make a mess and to keep my coughing down because Dad had a headache. I learned to make my own soup. And yet I didn't resent Natalie. She was just a kid like me. She didn't ask for the spotlight, it was simply handed to her, and she never thought to question why I stood in the shadows. She loved me in her own way. Sometimes she'd slip a piece of chocolate into my school bag or save the last pancake for me. But those little acts never changed the math in the household. There was always one golden child, and I wasn't it. As we got older, the gap didn't close, it grew. I became the low-maintenance daughter, the one who didn't ask for much. And because I didn't ask, they assumed I didn't need. That assumption would cost us all eventually, but at the time it just hurt, quietly, every single day. By the time Natalie turned 14, the phrase, "she's going to make this family proud," had already become a household mantra. My father said it with a chest full of conviction. My mother said it with eyes that gleamed with hope. And I learned to nod, smile, and stand aside like a pillar, holding up someone else's stage. Natalie was the one they called our investment, not in a harsh or transactional way. More like she was a garden they were tending carefully, expecting blossoms of prestige, of upward mobility. She got piano lessons with a teacher 2 towns over, one with credentials and a wait list. I was told music was expensive, and that not everyone needs to play an instrument to be successful. She got a new laptop when she turned 15, because she needs it for research. I was told to keep using the shared desktop in the hallway, which was fine, except it barely started after 10 minutes of wheezing. It wasn't just resources, it was language. My father started calling her the future doctor at family dinners. This one, he'd say, tapping her shoulder with pride, is going to take our family name to places we've never been. I remember one evening clearly. A distant uncle had visited. We were all sitting in the living room after dinner. The air was thick with the smell of lemongrass and soy. My father stood behind Natalie and declared, "This girl, she's the future of the Rivera family." Then he looked at me, smiled faintly, and added, "And this one's the tough one. Quiet but sturdy. She'll be okay." That sentence should have comforted me, but it landed like a verdict. Not brilliant, not essential. Just, okay. There's something lonely about being the daughter no one brags about. Not because you failed, but because your silence has made you forgettable. I got good grades too. I helped around the house. I never got into trouble. But Natalie, she shone. And in our house, shine was currency. Sometimes my mother would take her aside and whisper things I wasn't meant to hear, but always did. "You'll go far," she'd say. "You'll be the one who changes everything." I wondered what needed changing and why I couldn't be part of that change. At school, guidance counselors started calling Natalie gifted. She got pulled from class for advanced programs. I stayed where I was. No one asked what I wanted to become. No one asked if I dreamed big too. I once told my father I was interested in architecture. He nodded and said, "That's practical. A solid job. But your sister, she could be a surgeon." As if ambition only mattered when it was dramatic enough to impress a room full of strangers. Natalie began carrying the weight of expectation. She never complained, but I saw it in her shoulders, how they tightened before exams. How her jaw clenched when our parents reminded her, "We believe in you. Don't waste it." Meanwhile, I became the listener, the helper, the one who always offered to do dishes, to drive Natalie to tutoring, to proofread her college essays. I became the scaffolding beneath her ladder. And the more I supported her, the more invisible I felt. They didn't mean to hurt me, but sometimes love isn't measured in how much you give, it's measured in how loudly you believe someone matters. And in our home, the volume of belief was always louder for Natalie. At 17, she got into a prestigious pre-med program. My parents cried tears of joy. My mother baked 2 cakes, one vanilla, one chocolate, because Natalie loved options. I was told to take photos of the moment. None of me were taken. I kept the memory, though, not out of bitterness, but because it was the day I realized. In my family story, I wasn't the rising star. I was the quiet sky she was expected to rise into. When I was 18, I overheard my mother on the phone with one of her cousins. It was just past midnight, and I had come downstairs to get water. Her voice was soft, steady, and full of that confidence she wore like perfume. "Emily's the strong one," she said. "She's always been like that. You don't have to worry about her." I stood in the hallway just beyond the staircase, holding my breath so she wouldn't hear me. She said it with pride, yes, but also with finality. As if strength was a closed case for me. As if I had no right to ask for help again. That phrase, "you're strong, you can handle it," followed me like a shadow. It was meant to be a compliment, I knew, but over time it felt more like a permission slip for neglect. When Natalie was upset, she got comfort. When she was anxious, she got time, attention, soft reassurances. But when I felt overwhelmed, I got a pat on the back and a reminder. You've always been independent. You've always found your way. As if needing someone made me weak. As if asking for support was a betrayal of the role they'd written for me. One time in college, my rent was due, and my freelance project fell through. I called my mom not to ask for money, but just to talk, to vent, to feel heard. She listened patiently, then said, "You'll figure it out. You always do." And that was it. No follow-up, no questions. Just the gentle dismissal of someone who believed in me so much they stopped checking if I was drowning. I know she meant well. I know my parents didn't sit down and plan to make one daughter the delicate flower and the other a stone. But that's what happened. They carved us into opposites, Natalie the promise, me the proof. Natalie got to be fragile, to be guided, to be carried. I was the one they leaned on. Once during a power outage, my father handed me the flashlight and said, "Make sure your sister's okay." She was 2 years younger. She was already taller than me. But to them, she was the protected one. And I was the protector. That kind of role sticks to you, even when it wears you thin. At family dinners, when conversations got heavy, finances, sickness, future plans, they looked to me. Not for opinion, but for stability. "Emily won't panic," my dad once said. "She's always clear-headed." But no one ever asked what that clarity cost me. It cost me moments where I just wanted to be held, not tasked. Times when I didn't want to be the person who had it all figured out. Times when I wished someone would say, "You don't have to be strong today." But that day never came. My mother once hugged me and said, "You're my little soldier." And I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. But deep down, I wasn't a soldier. I was tired. I was tired of being the plan B. The one they could count on when life didn't go as planned for Natalie. Natalie had room to fall apart. I had to stay whole even when I was cracking. And slowly, I started to believe it too, that my needs were smaller, my dreams less urgent, my pain less real. I played the role so well, they forgot it was a performance. And maybe I did too, until the day they told me they were selling the house without telling me. "You're always welcome," they said. "But we assumed you'd be okay." Because that's what they always assumed. That I didn't need notice. That I didn't need space. That I didn't need anything. Because I was strong. Because I could handle it. Even when it broke me, the first time I realized I wasn't a priority, I was 8 years old. It was a Wednesday, warm, sunny, ordinary. The last day of after-school art club. We had spent weeks painting landscapes, and that day we got to take our work home. Mine was a clumsy attempt at a forest, all uneven trees, and a sky that bled into the hills. But I was proud of it. I remember clutching it in my hands, careful not to bend the edges, while the other kids ran toward their parents' cars. One by one, the parking lot emptied. At first, I didn't panic. I sat on the bench by the front gate legs, swinging eyes scanning the road. Maybe Mom had gotten stuck in traffic. Maybe Dad had one of his impromptu meetings. It had happened before. 10 minutes passed, then 20. The art teacher came out and asked if I was all right. I smiled. They're probably just running late. She waited with me for a while, then had to lock up. She offered to call home, but I told her no, it was fine. I didn't want to make it a big deal. I didn't want to seem helpless. By the time the sky began to shift toward evening, the school was silent. I stood there, my little painting pressed against my chest, wondering if maybe I had gotten the date wrong. Maybe I was supposed to walk home. Maybe this was my fault. I had no phone. I didn't know anyone's number by heart except the house phone. I crossed the lawn and sat on the curb, tucking my knees to my chest. That was when the ache crept in. Not fear, not yet, but the kind of ache that comes when you realize you're invisible. A full hour later, a familiar car pulled up. My dad rolled down the window. "Hop in," he said casually, like I'd just stepped out of the grocery store. No apology, no explanation. I slid into the back seat, still holding the painting, which now had a crease running through the bottom corner. "Where's your sister?" he asked as we drove. "She doesn't go to art club," I whispered. "Oh, right, that was it." No one at dinner mentioned it. No one asked how long I'd waited. I wanted to bring it up, I did, but Natalie was telling a story about her music lesson, and Mom was laughing, and Dad was already opening his laptop at the table. So I swallowed it, like every other time. That night I folded the painting in half and put it in the trash. It wasn't anger, it was resignation, like something inside me had settled. A quiet understanding that I had to manage my own expectations because no one else would. Over the years, that moment became a reference point, not because it was traumatic, but because it was subtle. It was ordinary, and that's what made it hurt more. No one yelled. No one was cruel. They just forgot me. And forgetting isn't loud. It's quiet. It's slow. It's what happens when love is lopsided and nobody notices. I grew used to making backup plans, keeping bus money in my pocket, memorizing routes home, watching the clock, because no one else would. And when they praised me for being so responsible, I smiled and nodded. I didn't say it was because I'd learned not to count on them. Even now, I remember that bench. I remember the way the sun turned gold behind the school building. I remember thinking maybe if I'd painted something better, they would have remembered me. It's a strange thought for an 8-year-old, but not a surprising one when you're me. Natalie's 16th birthday was a spectacle. They rented out the conservatory hall, glass ceilings, polished floors, a courtyard lit by fairy lights. Mom spent weeks planning it, like she was coordinating a royal gala. There was a dessert table shaped like a grand piano, a chocolate fountain taller than Natalie, and a 3-tier cake with edible gold flakes and hand-piped roses. I remember watching from the corner of the room, standing just outside the circle of laughter. My dress was the only one without sequins. Mom had said I didn't need anything new. "You already have that nice black one, don't you?" Yes, I did. The one I wore to the winter formal sophomore year. It still fit, but barely. Everyone was buzzing around Natalie, calling her beautiful, asking about her plans for college. She hadn't even taken her PSATs yet, but they were already talking about scholarships, internships, and her bright future. I heard one of Mom's friends call her the golden child. And Mom didn't correct her. Natalie looked radiant. I won't lie. She wore a deep green dress that made her look older, more poised. Her hair was curled into soft waves, and she had on heels for the first time. Dad made a speech. He talked about how proud they were, how she was the heart of the family, how she reminded him of Mom when she was younger. He never said anything like that about me. After the speech, they played a slideshow pictures of Natalie growing up. Some of them I had taken. Little moments captured on my old digital camera, her with frosting on her nose, riding a bike for the first time, playing piano in the living room. But I was barely in any of them. It was like I had been edited out of our family history. I remember standing beside the buffet table, holding a small plate of hors d'oeuvres. I didn't really want pretending I was full, so I wouldn't have to sit at a table alone. "Why aren't you dancing?" someone asked. It was Aunt Claire. I smiled, saving my energy. She nodded, already half turned toward someone else. The conversation ended before it began. Later that night, as they brought out the cake and everyone sang, I felt something shift. I wasn't jealous, not in the way people usually mean. I didn't want the cake or the compliments. I just wanted to be seen, not as a shadow, not as the independent one who didn't need fuss, just seen. Natalie blew out the candles and made a wish. Everyone clapped. Mom wiped a tear from her eye. Dad handed Natalie a small box with a key inside, a car key. They had gotten her a used Volkswagen, detailed and ribboned, parked just outside the hall. She screamed, of course, cried, hugged them both. It was touching, really. I left 15 minutes later without saying goodbye. No one noticed. I walked 2 blocks to the train station and sat alone on the platform bench, my heels pinching my feet, my makeup slightly smudged. In my clutch was a card I'd written for Natalie but never gave her. Inside I had written, "You've always had their love. I hope one day you see me too. I tore it in half and left it in the trash bin by the tracks. That night, as the train rattled home, I stared at my reflection in the window and realized something. I wasn't hurt by the party. I was hurt because deep down, I already knew I wasn't part of their story, not the way Natalie was. And they were fine with that. Everyone was. It didn't happen in one explosive moment. It happened in pieces. Tiny remarks, looks across the dinner table, pauses in conversations where my name should have been. But I can tell you the moment that finally pushed me over the edge. It was a Sunday morning, the kind where the sun creeps in too early and makes everything feel exposed. I had just made coffee. Dad was at the kitchen table going through invoices. Mom was folding laundry in the living room. Natalie was still asleep as usual after another night out. I sat down with my mug and asked Dad gently, "Do you still want me to proof the draft for the family website? You mentioned it last week." He didn't look up. "No, it's done. I gave it to Natalie." That was odd. Natalie barely knew how to crop a photo. I paused, but before I could ask, Mom walked in with a pile of towels. She said it without venom. No malice. Just a flat, everyday tone. "You know," she started, "maybe it's time you thought about getting your own place. You're almost 30. I blinked. "I pay rent," I said. Dad raised an eyebrow. "Barely." I looked at him. "I cover utilities. I clean. I cook." Mom shrugged. "You're a freelancer. It's not stable. You're still figuring things out." I stared at the two people who had raised me, who had once tucked me into bed and kissed my forehead and told me I could be anything. And now I was just a mouth to feed. Natalie waltzed downstairs 15 minutes later wearing one of my sweaters without asking again, and greeted them with a yawn and a smile. Dad offered her a plate of pancakes. Mom said she looked pale and asked if she was getting enough sleep. No one asked me anything. I moved out 3 weeks later. I didn't have much, just my laptop, some secondhand furniture, and 2 suitcases of clothes. I found a small studio apartment above a bookstore. It smelled like old paper and rain. The walls were thin, the faucet leaked, and the heater groaned at night like it had secrets. But it was mine. At first I told myself it was freedom, that I was finally in control. But some nights I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had just vanished from their lives. No one called, no one visited, not even Natalie. They didn't ask how I was managing or if I needed help. They didn't ask if I had heat in the winter or groceries during that month when 3 clients ghosted me. But the part that stung most, they never said "we miss you." Instead, during a phone call 1 month later, Mom said, "You're so independent now. I knew you'd manage. That's what makes you different from your sister. You don't need anyone." She meant it as a compliment, but it felt like a sentence. Because the truth is, I did need them. I just never said it. And they mistook my silence for strength, my resilience for rejection, and my self-sufficiency as some kind of warning label that read, "Don't worry about her. She's fine." That was when I started building boundaries. I stopped sending holiday cards. I stopped volunteering to design their Christmas flyers or edit Natalie's resumes. I stopped offering, and they didn't notice. That's when I knew I hadn't moved out. I had been erased. Even after everything, the dismissal, the quiet exile, the unspoken rejection, I couldn't bring myself to cut ties entirely. My father ran a small side business, helping local vendors digitize their services, payment systems, websites, basic branding. He wasn't a tech expert, but he had charm. People trusted him. But behind the scenes, he leaned on someone, me. For years, I'd handled the back-end work, coding the websites, setting up forms, fixing bugs he didn't even realize existed. He'd forward me emails from confused clients with a casual, "Can you look into this?" and I'd stay up past midnight sorting it out. After I moved out, I expected that work to stop. And for a while it did. Then one day I got a text. "Dad, client can't open invoice page. Link broken. No greeting, no hope you're well. Just the problem." I stared at the message for a long minute. My first instinct was to ignore it. But then I remembered how he used to drive me to school in the rain, how he once stayed up all night when I had a fever just to check my breathing. That version of him still lived somewhere in my memory, even if reality had blurred it. So I fixed the link. 5 minutes. No charge. No credit. No thanks. A week later, another message. Dad logo won't center on mobile. Weird margin. This time, I replied with a short tutorial. He didn't respond, but a day later, the logo was fixed exactly as I'd instructed. And so it went. No one in the family knew. Not Mom. Not Natalie. To them, I was the distant daughter who'd finally learned to stand on her own. But behind the curtain, I was still holding up part of the show. There was one moment, though, that stayed with me. A new client of his, a florist, called me directly. "I got your number from your dad," she said cheerfully. "He says you're the genius behind all his clean designs. You're the one who fixed that online order system, right?" I blinked. "He told you that?" "Yeah," said. "You're a bit of a ghost, but the brains behind the beauty." That's what he called you, for the first time in months. I felt something tighten in my chest. Pride, maybe, or longing, or some complicated mix I didn't have a name for. Because if he could say that to a stranger, why not to me? Still, I didn't confront him. I didn't send a message saying I heard what you said. Thank you. That wasn't our rhythm. Instead, I kept helping. I built him a scheduling tool so clients could book consultations online. I rewrote his FAQ page to be clearer. I even designed a seasonal logo refresh for free. Not out of duty, not even for love exactly, but because deep down, I still wanted to matter to them. Even in the shadows, I remember one afternoon checking the analytics dashboard I had set up for him. His traffic had spiked 40% in the past month. Conversion rates were up, sales were steady, and yet, no message, no great job, no acknowledgement. But I kept going, because when you've been silenced long enough, sometimes contribution becomes your only voice. And even if they couldn't or wouldn't see me, the work was there, quiet, efficient, necessary, just like me. It started with a coffee-stained envelope and a rushed phone call. "Can you come by this weekend?" Dad asked. "I need help with some paperwork. Just a few forms for the business." I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to help, but because by now I'd learned to read between the lines. Paperwork with my father usually meant something messy, something he didn't fully understand but hoped I would. I showed up on Saturday morning. The living room was cluttered with receipts, a laptop that wouldn't start, and a folder labeled Rivera Digital Solutions, LLC. I didn't know he'd named the company. Trying to clean things up, he explained, gesturing vaguely at the chaos. "You know, officialize it. Clients are asking for invoices with EINs now. Gotta make it look real." I nodded slowly, thumbing through the documents. LLC registration, operating agreement, articles of organization, nothing too complex but scattered and unstructured. He downloaded templates from the internet and filled them out halfway. And that's when I saw it. A signature line. "Why is my name here?" I asked. He looked at me sheepishly. "I need a second member to register the LLC as multi-member. It gives more tax flexibility. You don't actually have to do anything. Just sign." I stared at the page, my name typed under co-managing member. Legally, that meant ownership, shared liability, and if anything went wrong, taxes, lawsuits, fraud, it would hit me too. "I don't know, Dad." "It's just a formality," he said too quickly. "The IRS doesn't even care who signs as long as there are 2 names on paper. You're the only one I trust with this. The only one he trusts." The irony hung in the air, bitter and sharp, because this man who had once told me I was too cold, too independent, too difficult, was now asking for my signature to build something he could control. And yet, part of me still wanted to say yes. Not because I trusted him, but because I still craved being needed. So I signed. I wrote my name with a steady hand, no flourish. No smile, no confirmation. Just ink on paper. And in that moment, I became part of the company, legally, financially, quietly. I created an EIN number online. filed the documents with the state, paid the $110 registration fee from my own account. I even fixed his email signature so it didn't say sent from my iPhone. And he never said thank you, not once. Instead, 2 weeks later, he forwarded me a contract from a new client, a law firm, ironically, and said, "Can you check this for red flags?" I did. I flagged 4 clauses that were exploitative, revised the scope of work, suggested adding a late payment penalty. He sent it back to the client as is, and they accepted. When he closed the deal, he told the family over dinner that business is booming. He didn't mention me, not to Mom, not to Natalie. Just smiled, poured himself another glass of wine, and talked about how entrepreneurship runs in the blood. I wasn't even invited to that dinner. I heard about it from a cousin's Instagram story. That night, I lay in my studio apartment. Walls still bare, mattress still on the floor, and wondered if I'd made a mistake. If signing that document had tied me to a legacy that never truly wanted me. But I also knew this: my name was on those papers. My identity was linked to the company's fate. And one day, if everything came crashing down, they wouldn't be able to pretend I'd never been part of it. Because now I was. On record. On purpose. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of a different kind of leverage. I hadn't planned to go home that day. Honestly, I'd been debating it all week. But something in me, maybe hope, maybe stupidity, made me board that late afternoon bus. The ride took nearly 2 hours. I watched the suburbs melt into old neighborhoods, the kind that hadn't changed in decades. My fingers clutched a small box of pastries from the corner bakery I used to love. When I reached the front gate, I paused. The house looked the same, neat, proud, with that chipped wind chime still dangling near the porch. I breathed in. No one answered when I knocked. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, I heard laughter, loud, cheerful. Music was playing, upbeat, polished, not the kind you'd play for a quiet family dinner. I stepped into the living room. There were balloons, streamers, a cake on the dining table with bright pink frosting. And then I saw it. "Happy Birthday, Sophia," spelled across the wall. My name wasn't there. No one had expected me. I wasn't invited. I stood there like a stranger in my own childhood home. The living room shimmered with gold and rose decorations. Sophia's favorite colors. Her name was on every detail: the banner, the napkins, even custom cupcakes. I scanned the room, hoping absurdly to find something with my name. Anything. Maybe a shared message. Maybe even just a happy birthday to both. There was nothing. People walked past me with plates of food, laughing, hugging. Cousins, aunts, neighbors. None of them greeted me. Most didn't even look up. Then I heard it. "Oh my God, this is the best birthday ever," Sophia's voice. Clear, delighted as she hugged one of her friends. A pang shot through my chest. I glanced at the date again on my phone. June 3rd, still my birthday too. But this celebration, it wasn't for me. It never had been. Someone brushed past me, handing Sophia a gift bag. I looked down at the pastries, still in my hand, untouched, unnecessary. I placed them on the kitchen counter. And for the first time that day, I said nothing. I lingered near the hallway, not sure if I should stay or slip out unnoticed. That's when Mom spotted me. Her smile froze just for a second. Then she walked over with that carefully practiced calm. "You should have told us you were coming," she whispered. Not unkindly, but not kindly either. "I did," I replied. "Last week, in the group chat. You left it on red." She glanced away, adjusting a napkin on the table like it mattered. "Well, it's Sophia's big day. We didn't want distractions. You know how she gets anxious." Anxious, I almost laughed. "Because her older sister exists?" Mom's jaw tightened. "Please don't make this a scene. You always have a way of making things about you. Today isn't that. It's her birthday." I nodded slowly. "It's mine too." She exhaled like that fact was inconvenient. "Let's just keep the mood light, okay? It's not the time. Not the time. Not the place. Not the daughter." I looked past her where Sophia laughed under strings of fairy lights. I'd never felt more like a shadow at my own celebration. The hallway was still warm with music and laughter, but my father's voice cut through it all. "Can we talk just a second?" he said, ushering me into his study, the only place in the house that had never changed. He shut the door behind us like we were discussing logistics, not family. "I've been meaning to call you." He began shifting papers on the desk he used to write birthday cards from back when he remembered. I stood silently. "We're reconfiguring the back room. Your old space. It'll be an office now for your sister and me. We're launching the consulting side of the business." I blinked. "So you're kicking me out. It's not personal," he said quickly. "It's practical. You barely stay here. And the space, it's valuable. Sophia needs it." I looked at the framed photo on the bookshelf, our last family trip, where I was cropped out for the holiday card. "And where am I supposed to go?" He shrugged. "You're independent, always have been. You'll figure it out." That moment wasn't loud, but it was final. They'd chosen her. And they expected me to disappear quietly. I stepped out of the study, hoping for someone to stop me. A glance, a question, anything. But the living room was glowing with warm lights and laughter. My mother was lighting the candles on Sophia's cake, her face flushed with joy. My father returned to the crowd, already wearing his host's smile. No one noticed the suitcase. I rolled quietly down the hallway. Sophia looked radiant, dressed in soft lavender, surrounded by friends. Someone handed her a champagne glass. She didn't even look at me. The kitchen smelled of roast chicken, my favorite once. But tonight I wasn't hungry. I paused in the entryway. My coat hung on the same hook as always, untouched. My shoes were still lined up neatly beneath the bench, as if this were still my home. No one asked me to stay. No one asked where I'd go. No one even looked up. Just like that, I walked out, into the cold air with my heart pounding. It was still my birthday, and I had nowhere to be. Upstairs, my room was just as I had left it, neat, small, quiet. But tonight it felt like a stranger's space, like I was intruding. I opened the closet. Most of my clothes were already in my apartment, but some childhood things remained: an old scarf, the book Mom once read to me when I was sick. The medal I won for a spelling bee no one had attended. I didn't take them. I took my laptop from the desk, the one I used to design Dad's project decks. It still had my last invoice draft open, unpaid. I pulled my leather tote from the corner. It held a charger, a notebook, 2 pens. I added a small framed photo of me and Sophia from when we were still just sisters, not roles. I zipped it shut. That was it, my life in a bag. Downstairs, laughter exploded from the dining room. I took one last look, not to say goodbye, just to remember how this house never once tried to hold me. Then I closed the door, quietly, too quietly for anyone to notice. The room I found that night wasn't much. A basement-level unit in a faded Victorian on the edge of town, advertised as a studio apartment, but felt more like a converted storage closet. The mattress sagged in the middle, the window barely opened, and the pipes in the walls moaned like old ghosts. But it was mine. Paid for with the last freelance payment, I had received $285 for a week's worth of late-night revisions and 4 rounds of client edits. I bought an electric kettle and a space heater from a thrift store the next morning, ate oatmeal 3 times a day, watched condensation gather inside the thin window glass, while I worked shoulders curled inward like I was always apologizing. I used public Wi-Fi from the cafe across the street to apply for contracts, sent cold emails, reached out to old clients I hadn't spoken to in months. Some didn't answer, some did with offers smaller than they used to give. But I took them. Each night I folded my clothes back into my duffel bag, just in case I couldn't make rent. No one asked where I'd gone, not Mom, not Dad, not even Sophia. There was a freedom in that silence, and a grief too. But mostly there was space to breathe, to plan, to wait. Because I wasn't done yet. By the second week, the rhythm returned, not the comfortable kind, but the mechanical kind that gets you through. Wake up, make tea, check emails, bid on gigs, then build. I'd spent years designing financial dashboards for small businesses, budgeting modules, tracking sheets, client invoicing tools. At home, I'd been the invisible architect behind Dad's company, the one who structured the database, the one who wrote the tax categorization rules. Now I took all that and started over. From scratch. For myself. I didn't have fancy software, just open source code and my own spreadsheets. I called it Heron like the bird. Quiet, sharp-eyed patient. Each night I added another piece. A smarter auto-categorization function. A tracker for subcontractor payments. Tax estimation by state. By the end of the month, I had a working prototype. Rough but clean. Something I could sell. One of my old clients, a woman named Darcy, who ran a nonprofit in Oregon, agreed to test it for free. Her feedback came in waves. Simplify this page, love the real-time alerts. Can you add donation tracking? I stayed up all night tweaking. Heron version 1.2 went live 2 weeks later. 3 new clients came by word of mouth. And suddenly I wasn't surviving, I was moving. Not far, not fast, but forward. In the corner of my mind, I kept remembering something Dad once said during dinner. It's all about control, kid. Control the numbers, you control the story. He meant it like a joke. I didn't laugh then. But I remembered now, and I started wondering whose story had I really been writing all those years. It started as a LinkedIn message. Short, polite, almost dismissible. Hi, I was referred to you by Darcy Thompson. I'm the CFO at Ridgewell and Pines. We're looking for a lightweight financial tracker for our satellite operations. Do you consult? I read it 3 times. Ridgewell and Pines wasn't just any firm. It was a mid-size investment group with clients spanning both coasts. I'd studied their portfolio in college back when I thought finance was power, and power was everything I never had. My hands shook slightly as I typed my reply. Professional, crisp, confident, at least on the surface. The video call happened 2 days later. I wore my best blouse-applied lipstick and angled the camera to hide the peeling paint behind me. I built Heron to work for people, not against them, I told them. It's lean, transparent, and adaptable. Their head of operations asked about encryption. Their lead accountant asked about reconciliation time. I answered every question with clarity and restraint. 40 minutes in, the CFO leaned forward and smiled. We like it. We'd like a 2-month pilot paid. After the call ended, I didn't move for a full minute. Then I laughed. Not the bitter kind I'd grown used to. A real one. Light and surprised, like something inside me had clicked back into place. That night, I looked at my bank account. For the first time in months, I saw a number that didn't make my stomach drop. The next day, I made a silent promise I would never again ask for space at someone else's table. I'd build my own, brick by brick, bite by bite. And if anyone ever tried to erase me again, well, they'd have to go through Heron first. Tea came back to me in pieces, like dust shaken from an old attic box. 2 years ago, before everything collapsed, Dad had shown up at my apartment with a binder. No greeting, no small talk. Just, I need help setting up a financial system that can't be traced back to me. I'd blinked. For what business restructuring, he said too fast. You know how the IRS is. He never explained further. But I was hungry for his approval then. Still naive enough to believe that helping him might mean finally being seen. So I spent 2 weekends building it a decentralized ledger, using layered shell accounts and dummy corporations. Nothing illegal on the surface, but it danced on the edge of ethical lines. I'd called the core directory Nest. He smirked when he saw the name. Smart girl, he said. It felt like a trophy. Back then, I didn't ask questions. He didn't offer answers. Now, sitting alone in my rented room, I pulled out my old backup drive and searched for the term. Nest. There it was. The original build. Password protected, but my fingers still remembered the keystrokes. Inside a web of routing paths, invoice loops, and email scripts. Some marked Maria, others Lily, some simply X1 or Ghost Co. And all of it, every node, every transaction tied to the same logic tree I had written by hand. I stared at the structure for a long while. What I'd once considered clever now looked like a roadmap to something far darker. And for the first time I felt it not just as code, but as evidence. This wasn't just a project. It was a door. one I had once built to help him. Now I was going to walk through it. But for myself, I didn't sleep that night. I laid out the entire structure of Nest on my laptop screen, split-screened with 2 spreadsheets I created just to analyze flow patterns. There was a rhythm to the movement of money, one I'd ignored back then. But now with distance with perspective, it screamed. Every second Friday payments moved in small amounts from 6 separate vendors. Always just under $10,000, low enough to dodge mandatory reporting. Every third Tuesday, those funds were bundled into a single transfer routed through a Delaware. At first, I hesitated. I stared at Michelle Langston's contact for hours. She was my legal ethics professor, back at community college, sharp as glass, and just as cutting when someone crossed a line. We hadn't spoken in years, but I remembered what she told me once, after class. If you ever see someone use your brain to commit a crime, don't let your silence be their alibi. I hit call. Emily, she said, surprised but not unfriendly. It's been a while. I got right to it. No small talk, no easing in. I told her everything, how I'd unknowingly helped my father build a web of hidden finances, how I'd just uncovered the tax avoidance pattern, and how the business was now expanding using a structure I'd designed. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, she was quiet for a beat, then said, "You didn't sign anything binding your silence, did you?" "No." "Good. Then here's what we'll do." She outlined the legal perimeter first, how I was shielded by the fact that I was not a formal business partner, had no financial gain, and hadn't accessed the system in over 2 years. Then came the strategy document, everything. Annotate changes, save screenshots, backup timestamps. And Emily, she added, "Before we hung up, don't warn them. Not yet. People like your father, they'll weaponize even an apology." I hung up and exhaled. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the quiet click of clarity. I wasn't powerless anymore. I was a witness. And for the first time, I intended to act like one. The complaint was ready. Every document, every screenshot, every timestamp neatly compiled in a folder titled, "For When They Cross the Line." I spent 2 sleepless nights writing the statement. Michelle reviewed it, made notes, and added a clause emphasizing my non-involvement in financial decisions post-departure. I printed 3 copies and sealed them in envelopes. One for the tax authority, one for the board of the company, one just in case. But I didn't send them. I wanted to. God knows I did. But something in me, maybe the last thread of daughterly hope, held my hand back. Instead, I waited. Not out of fear, not because I doubted myself, but because I knew once that document was sent, there would be no turning back. No family dinners, no reconciliations, just courtrooms and headlines and the final fracture. So I put the envelopes in my drawer, labeled them justice, not revenge, and I waited for them to show me who they truly were one final time. 2 months later, I came back. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't dress to impress or announce anything grand. I just showed up with a small box of pastries from their favorite bakery, the same one I used to stop by every Friday. Dad opened the door. He looked startled, not happy, not angry, just surprised. "We're busy," he said. "Now's not a good time." "I brought something," I replied, holding up the box like a peace offering. He didn't even glance at it. "We're in the middle of a meeting. Maybe another day." Mom appeared behind him. Her eyes met mine for half a second. Then she looked away as if I were a neighbor's child selling cookies. "I just wanted to say hi," I said softly. "You've said it," Dad answered, and the door began to close. He didn't slam it. That almost made it worse. I stood there on the front step for a full minute, holding that stupid box of eclairs like an idiot. The gate clicked behind me as I walked away. That was when I knew. There would be no peace offering, no redemption arc, no return to maybe someday. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was who they chose to be. A week later, I saw it on LinkedIn. My sister beaming radiant, standing in front of a polished glass wall with the new company logo, Rivera Financial Solutions. Underneath the post, proud to be expanding the family legacy using the infrastructure my father and I built together. My design, my model, my labor. There were diagrams in the carousel slides. I remembered building systems I had debugged at 2 a.m. The caption continued, "This structure was our turning point." RI wasn't even mentioned. It felt like watching someone accept an award for a story they stole and being told to clap. I scrolled through the comments. Old clients of mine, former colleagues. People congratulating her brilliance. Not one person asked about me. Not one person knew I existed behind the curtain. And just like that, the last tether snapped. This wasn't just emotional anymore. It was professional, legal, and it was theft. I reached into my drawer, took out the envelope marked Tax Authority, and placed it on the desk. No rage, no drama. Just the calm precision of someone done asking for acknowledgement. It was late afternoon when I dropped the envelope off. I didn't need a return receipt. I knew it would land. 3 days later, I received a phone call, not from my parents, but from a junior analyst I used to tutor. "Hey, did you design the Rivera account structure?" he asked cautiously. I paused. "Why, there's a review underway." Tax Authority flagged discrepancies in the accounts. Something about routing paths and undeclared holdings. My heart didn't race. It simply steadied. Within a week, the company's main accounts were frozen. By Friday, I saw the first post disappear from my sister's feed. A press release followed technical issues and routine auditing. Michelle called that night. "You've done everything right. Keep quiet. Let the facts speak." And I did. It wasn't vengeance. It wasn't public humiliation. It was silence doing its work. And watching those who erased me now stumble to rewrite their version of the truth without the parts only I knew how to build. I was reviewing a client portfolio on my laptop when the notification chimed. Alert: transaction failed. Account status temporarily frozen. Pending investigation. At first, I thought it was one of my sandbox accounts. But then the second alert came in. Different bank, different name, then a third. Each one tied to the same umbrella corporation my father had set up under aliases I helped him register back when I was still the invisible daughter with a knack for numbers. They were unraveling. I didn't smile. I didn't celebrate. I just leaned back in my chair and watched the digital scaffolding collapse in real time. By noon, I'd received a message from an old mutual connection. Someone who worked in compliance at the central bank. "Something big's happening at Rivera Holdings. Looks like a freeze order just hit all linked accounts. Tax authorities involved." "You okay?" I typed back. "I'm fine. Thanks for the heads up." No one had called me yet. Not my father, not my mother, not my sister. But I knew that silence well. It wasn't peace, it was panic. By evening, the whispers had grown. Vendors hadn't been paid. Staff salaries were pending. And my sister's name was trending, but for all the wrong reasons. The same name that had been spotlighted days before was now under scrutiny. Where did the capital come from? Who designed the system? Why were there offshore structures? I opened my drawer again where the final envelope remained. Still sealed? Still untouched. It wasn't needed. Not yet. By the end of the week, Rivera Holdings was paralyzed. Internal emails leaked vendors had begun pulling out payroll, bounced investors, called emergency meetings. The financial arteries had frozen. No one knew exactly where the breach had started, but the effect was total. Banks issued holds. Subcontractors backed out. Even the small storefront that bore my father's name sat shuttered by Friday afternoon. I watched all of it unfold quietly from my modest desk in the shared workspace I now rented. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, just gravity. The empire that once had no space for me now had no oxygen to breathe. In desperation, my father hired a forensic accountant, ironically someone who had once been my mentor. 3 days into the audit, my name appeared, not in bold, not flashing, just quietly embedded into the system's root, a line of code, an account ID, a buried protocol that bore my signature. He must have felt his breath catch. There it was, my trace, not as a saboteur, but as the builder, The system he'd claimed as his own had always belonged to the daughter he erased. I was boiling pasta when my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't move at first, just stared as it rang a second time. I picked up but didn't say anything. His voice cracked through the static. "It's me, your father." A pause. "We need to talk." I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, because I was finally calm. Because I wanted him to hear silence the way I had lived in it. He waited. Then I said, "Check your inbox," and hung up. What he found was a PDF titled Ray Rivera Financial Structure Co-Design Signature Acknowledgement. His own signature. Dated, notarized, filed under a shared business entity. The one he made me sign to feel involved back when he thought it meant nothing. But it meant everything. It was legal evidence that I had co-created the system. That I wasn't an outsider. I was the foundation. No threats, no letters, just one file. Let the weight of it speak. It was late. My doorbell buzzed twice. I looked through the peephole. My mother, alone, holding a folded cardigan like a peace offering. Her face creased not from age but from regret she couldn't hide. I opened the door. She didn't speak right away, just stood there in the hallway as if the years between us were visible in the air. "I didn't know how bad it had gotten," she whispered. "I thought your father had it under control. I didn't know you were part of it." I said nothing. She stepped in slowly like she was asking permission to remember me again. "We lost everything," she said, tears rising. "They're saying the system is compromised, that we can't access our accounts until an internal investigation clears." She placed the cardigan on the chair. "You always liked this color." I nodded once, then said the first sentence I'd rehearsed 1,000 times. "I never wanted to destroy anything," I said quietly. "I just wanted you to see that I existed." She blinked as if hearing it for the first time. "All those years you looked past me, said I was strong, I'd be fine, I didn't need help. You built her future. You made sure she never had to fight. And when I clawed my way up, I did it alone." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. This wasn't revenge. This was proof that I was there the whole time, that I mattered. She collapsed into the chair, cardigan slipping from her hands. We sat in silence. Outside, rain started tapping on the window. And for once, she stayed. Not as a mother who had everything to give, but as a woman who had everything to learn. The knock came on a Sunday morning. I was folding laundry, humming softly. When I opened the door, it was her, my sister. The same sister whose birthdays were always celebrated with balloons, cakes, and songs, while mine passed like ordinary Tuesdays. She looked different. No makeup, no performative smile. Just her standing alone, holding a paper bag with 2 coffees. "I didn't know how to start," she said. "But I figured coffee helps." I stepped aside. We sat on the floor, like we used to when we were kids before she became the sun and I the shadow. She inhaled deeply. "You always helped Dad more than I ever did. You built the system. I just used it. Silence. And I used you too. I let them believe I was the genius while you were just convenient." I stayed quiet, let her sit in that truth. She looked down. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Not just for the business, for erasing you, for letting them erase you." My throat tightened, but I said only one word. "Thanks." And somehow that was enough. Back at his office, my father stood in front of his desk, empty now, save for one thing. A framed contract. The one I had sent him. He picked it up, hands trembling slightly. Ran a finger over the faded ink, where his signature lay next to mine. He sat slowly. No advisors. No board. No applause. Just a father face to face with the evidence of his own blindness. He remembered the day he had made me sign it. "It'll make you feel involved," he had said. He never imagined it would one day make me visible. He placed the frame back on the desk and exhaled long and slow. "I never saw you," he murmured to no one. "But you were there the whole time." That night, my mother sat in the kitchen stirring a cup of tea she never drank. On the table was a faded photograph me at 5 standing alone in front of the school gate, clutching a backpack looking for someone who never came. She had forgotten this picture existed. It had fallen behind the bookshelf years ago. Now holding it, she cried, not for the first time as a woman, but for the first time as a mother. "You always said you were okay," she whispered. "And I always believed you, because it was easier than asking why you were quiet." Her tears dropped onto the photo. I should have looked closer. 3 days later, we met in a small downtown legal office. My lawyer, a neutral notary, my parents, my sister, me. No courtroom, no accusations, just documents, boundaries, truth. I handed over a folder labeled Proposed Terms of Reintegration. They looked nervous. I spoke clearly. "I'm not suing you. I never was. I'm here to make it right on paper." The lawyer nodded. "We're proposing formal acknowledgement of co-foundership, name reinstatement in corporate records. No financial compensation requested." My father blinked. "You don't want money?" "No." Why I paused, then answered. "Because this isn't about money. It never was." They signed. No hesitation, no negotiation. This time the pen didn't shake in my father's hand. He passed me the final page, eyes meeting mine, not as a businessman, but as a man trying to rebuild something he helped destroy. I took it, signed. The notary stamped the document. And just like that, I was no longer erased. I was part of it. Not because I demanded vengeance, but because I offered something rarer, a chance to rewrite the ending. As we packed up to leave, I turned to them. "There's just one more thing I want." They looked up. "I want you to call me your daughter." The room went still. My mother's eyes welled again. My father looked away, jaw tight. Not the older one, not the freelancer, not the one who left. Just your daughter. My sister put a hand on my arm. "You always were." My mother reached for my hand. "We're sorry it took us this long to say it." I smiled. And for the first time in years, I felt seen, not because I fought for a place, but because they finally offered one. 3 weeks after the legal meeting, my father stepped down from the company. No press release, no grand farewell. Just a quiet handover in a conference room where once I was invisible. My sister called me that afternoon. We updated the registry. "You're officially listed as the original systems architect," she said, then paused. "And I'm transferring full copyright back to you. The framework, the blueprint, everything. It's yours." I didn't speak at first, because I knew what that meant. She wasn't just acknowledging the past, she was letting go of control, returning what had been mine before it was ever hers. "Why now?" I finally asked. "Because I want to build something honest. And I can't do that by standing on what you built alone." She sounded free. And in that I felt free too. I didn't return to the company. That chapter had closed. Instead, I filed paperwork to establish something new. The First Spark Foundation, its mission. To offer financial consulting and microgrants to individuals estranged from family support who were trying to make a new start. People like me who were labeled as strong, independent, and therefore undeserving of help. Our tagline was simple: being on your own doesn't mean you're alone. I hosted workshops, advised freelancers starting from scratch, built a hotline where people could just talk without being judged. The foundation grew faster than I expected. I didn't build it out of spite. I built it out of understanding. Because sometimes revenge looks like helping the version of you who never got helped. One Thursday night after an unusually long board meeting, I returned to my apartment and opened my inbox. Subject line, from Mom. It had been months since we last spoke. Inside just one paragraph: "I know I wasn't the mother you needed. I see that now. I don't want your success. I don't want your forgiveness if you're not ready. But I do want you to know I've been watching every step since the day you walked out with that bag and your laptop. And I am proud of you. If one day you can say you forgive me, please know I'll be listening. No attachments. No love, Mom." Just a name at the bottom, but it was enough. Because this time she wasn't asking for a place in my life. She was acknowledging she had lost it and wanted to earn it back. That weekend, I cleaned out the storage closet in my apartment. Dust-covered boxes labeled old taxes, college notes, don't open unless sad. At the very bottom was one simply marked childhood. Inside an envelope with faded marker handwriting, "Happy birthday. Love, Dad." It was unopened. I slid out the contents. A single Polaroid photo, me age 5, squeezed between my parents at the park. My face frozen in mid-laugh, their arms around me. I had no memory of that moment. But the photo proved it happened. And maybe that was the point. Not to erase what came after, but to remember that once we were something worth saving. I framed the photo, placed it on my office desk right beside the foundation's first donor certificate. A client once asked me during a seminar, "How did you forgive them?" I didn't answer right away. Then said they didn't become perfect. They became honest. And that's when I stopped needing an apology I could measure. I stopped trying to win love and started building peace. Later that evening, as I closed the office lights, I looked again at the photo. 5-year-old me had no idea what was ahead, no clue that she'd grow up building systems others would use, carrying family pain others would ignore. But now she wasn't just a footnote in someone else's story. She had written her own. And for the first time in a long time, I whispered, "I'm home." Sometimes, family isn't what raises you. It's what you survive. There comes a moment when you stop asking why they didn't choose you and start choosing yourself. Forgiveness doesn't always mean forgetting. It can mean letting go of needing them to say the right thing, do the right thing, or be the person you needed back then. Family isn't always right, but sometimes forgiving them is the justice you give yourself. Thank you for staying with this story. If you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or hurt by the people who were supposed to protect you, you're not alone. Drop a comment below. Tell us your story or simply say, "I'm still here." Like, share, and subscribe to Revenge Dismantled for more stories that prove strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it remembers.